AMALearning, you're about to. Specification point 2.15b. Explain the structure and function of the eye as a sensory receptor, including the role of the cornea and lens, the iris, rod and cone cells in the retina. This is a biology-only specification point. To successfully answer any GCSE questions linked to this specification point, you will need to be able to label the eye, describe the function of the key parts of the eye, know what the rod and cone cells do, explain how we see near and far objects, and explain how the eye responds to bright and dim light. The eye is a sensory organ that detects light and allows vision. The eye's structure enables it to detect light and focus images, which is essential for clear vision. Knowing how to label the eye makes this specification point easier to understand. So, let's label the eye. This is the iris, cornea, pupil, suspensory ligaments, ciliary muscles, optic nerve, the retina, the sclera, and finally, the lens. The lens is a transparent biconvex structure in the eye that refracts light onto the retina. The ciliary muscles are muscles that are connected to the lens by the suspensory ligaments. They change the shape of the lens. The suspensory ligaments connect the lens to the ciliary muscles. The pupil is the hole in the middle of the iris that lets light in. Its diameter is controlled by the iris. The iris is the colored part of the eye. It controls how much light enters the pupil. The cornea is a transparent layer at the front of the eye. It refracts light into the eye. What do we mean by the cornea refracts the light? Simply put, it means that the cornea bends the light. It changes the light's direction to ensure the light enters the eye. The sclera is the white outer layer of the eye that protects it from injury. This is the retina. The retina is made up of a group of cells that detect light. The retina is made up of rods and cones. Rods detect light intensity and work in dim light, while cones detect color and require bright light. The optic nerve carries impulses from the eye to the brain. After the rod and cone cells in the retina detect a stimulus, in this case light. They send a message to the CNS through the sensory neuron. In this case, the sensory neuron is the optic nerve. Rod cells enable us to see objects in dim light. Rods are receptor cells that detect differences in light intensity. They do not detect color. Cone cells enable us to see objects clearly in bright light and in color. There are 3 types of cone: red, green, and blue. They do not function well in dim light. How do our eyes help us to see near or far objects? The simple answer: the eyes accommodate. Accommodation is the process of changing the shape of the lens to focus on near or distant objects. When we are looking at an object that is near to us, the ciliary muscles contract. The suspensory ligaments loosen. The lens becomes thicker and refracts the light rays more strongly. When we are looking at something far away from us, the ciliary muscles relax. The suspensory ligaments are pulled tight. The lens is then pulled thin and only slightly refracts light rays. In bright light, the pupil reduces in size. Radial muscle of the iris relax. Circular muscles of the iris contract. This reduces the amount of light entering the eye. In dim light, the pupil increases in size. Radial muscle of the iris contract. Circular muscles of the iris relax. This increases the amount of light entering the eye. Time to check your understanding and apply what we have learnt to this exam-style question. The question is asking us to explain the functions of the rod and cone cells. We have learnt that rod cells enable us to see objects in dim light. Rods are receptor cells that detect differences in light intensity, and they do not detect color. Cone cells enable us to see objects clearly in bright light and in color. There are 3 types of cone cells: red, green, and blue, and they do not function well in dim light. Additionally, we have learnt about the role of the optic nerve. After the rod and cone cells detect a stimulus, They send an impulse to the CNS through the sensory neuron, which in this case is the optic nerve. Now, let's compare our learning to the mark scheme. We have learnt enough to have got the mark for every bullet point. This means we got full marks. This is a multiple choice question asking the following. What happens to the lens and the amount the light rays bend? When the eye changes from focusing on a distant object to focusing on a near object, we have learnt that. When we are looking at an object that is near to us, the ciliary muscles contract, the suspensory ligaments loosen, the lens becomes thicker and refracts the light rays more strongly. This means the correct answer is B. Let's try one more exam-style question. The question is asking us to describe the changes that occur in the eye when a bright light is directed into the eye. We have learnt that. In bright light, the pupil reduces in size. Radial muscles of the iris relax. Circular muscles of the iris contract. This reduces the amount of light entering the eye. Now, let's compare our learning to the mark scheme. We have learnt enough to have got the mark for the first, second, and the third bullet point. This means we got full marks. Our animations were designed by experienced UK-trained teachers. We have been achieving amongst the best results in the country for many years, and we decided it was time to share our success. Have you just amaled and want to amal some more? Don't forget to like, subscribe and share to keep yourself up to date with the latest uploads. AMALearning, you just did.